So it's almost time for the moment of truth where we need to flip the power switch and see what happens, but with one step to do before that. We need to make a Windows 11 bootable USB drive. So you're going to need a USB drive. It needs to be at least 8 gigabytes and it needs to ideally be empty. The reason it needs to be empty because everything on the drive is going to get wiped during the installation process. You are going to need another PC to create this on, so I'm going to use my own PC. We've got my USB drive and we'll plug it into the PC. So we're going to scan down to create Windows 11 installation media and click download now. We can double click on the file, click yes. We're going to accept the agreement. So it's going to fill in the language and the edition that you want. If you want to change these, you can uncheck this box and you're going to have access to these drop down menus. And we'll click on next. So we're going to want to create a USB flash drive, and as I've mentioned, it needs to be 8 gigabytes and everything on this is going to be wiped. So when we click next, it's going to find our removable drive, which is this one here. I'm going to select it, click next. Okay, so we can go ahead and click on finish. We can then eject our drive and we can pull it out of the PC. The whole process took around about 15 minutes or so we're ready for the next step. Next, we're ready to get everything connected up to our PC, so we'll plug in our power cable. We're going to need to plug in our HDMI cable, our DisplayPort cable. Now importantly, this goes into your graphics card, not the connectors on your motherboard. We can plug in the antennas for our Wi-Fi. Or if you prefer, you can plug in an Ethernet cable or both. We can plug in our keyboard and our mouse. And importantly, we can plug in our Windows 11 bootable USB drive. So we've now reached the most nerve-wracking bit of any PC build. We're going to have to flip the power switch and see if it works. So let's go ahead. So good signs. I can hear water moving in the cooler. We've got fans spinning, lights are appearing. So we're just going to have to watch the monitor and see what happens. So if for some reason your PC doesn't post, I have made a troubleshooting video and you'll find a link to it in the description. So the PC had switched itself on and off. That's nothing to be alarmed about. We can hear the fans are ramping down, so that's a good sign that hopefully we'll be getting something on the screen. And there we go. So this screen will appear the first time you power on the PC. So it's telling us to press F1 to enter the BIOS, so we'll do that. So this is what the BIOS homepage looks like, and we'll be coming back here later on. I'm going to show you how to update the BIOS. I'll show you how to adjust the important settings, such as enable the XMP profile on our RAM and adjusting the fan curves. I don't like making any changes to the BIOS initially until we install Windows. The last thing we want to do is make our PC unstable during the Windows installation. So the easiest thing is just to leave the BIOS. We can save the settings by pressing F10. It's going to tell us we haven't actually made any changes, and we're just going to click on OK. So what the PC will do now is it will restart. This time it will hopefully find our bootable USB drive in the back of the PC and boot off that, because the SSDs that we have installed in the system are completely blank, so it won't be able to boot from those. So it's just a matter of waiting, and the next thing we're looking to see is the Windows installer icon. Okay, so there we're through to the Windows installation screen. So next step is to install Windows 11. Okay, so I'm from the United Kingdom, so I'm just going to click on Next. We'll click Next again, and what we're looking to do is install Windows 11. So we'll agree to the terms and conditions and click on Next. So if you've already got a Windows product key, you can go ahead and enter it at this stage. I'm going to be getting mine later on. We'll show you that once we have installed Windows on the PC. So what I'm going to do is click I don't have a product key, and then we're going to need to select the version of Windows 11 that I'm going to get a product key for. So I'm going to get one for Windows 11 Pro and click on Next. We can click Accept. So we now need to decide where we want to install Windows 11. So 3 drives are showing up. The first 2 are the SSDs we have installed in the system, and the third drive is our bootable USB drive. You'll see now why I've said it's important. If you've got multiple drives of the same capacity, you might not want to plug them all in at this stage. So you can see our drives are labeled as disk 0 and disk 1. So we had 2 drives of 1 terabyte capacity and we wanted to install in a particular one of these. It might be difficult to identify which was the right drive. So if you do have this situation, what I would recommend doing is just plugging in the drive that you want to install Windows on. You can go ahead and install Windows and then install the drive at a later stage. Now in general, I would recommend installing Windows on the lower capacity drive, providing there's enough space on it for your installation, and leave the bigger drive 3 for your video files if you're going to do it for content creation or a games library. For the particular reasons I'm building this PC, I am, however, going to install it on the bigger drive. So I'll select it and click Next. And then we can click on Install. So at this stage, Windows has been installed. We just need to set it up so we can remove the USB drive from the PC. So I'm from the United Kingdom. I'm just going to click on Yes. And again, I'm happy with the United Kingdom keyboard. I don't want a secondary keyboard, so I'm going to click Skip. So although I do have an Ethernet cable plugged into our PC, it's not showing up a connection, and this could be because of a lack of a driver. So what we're going to want to do on another PC is head over to our motherboards page. We're going to click on Support. We're then going to click on Driver and Utility. We're going to select our operating system, Windows 11 64-bit, and we can see here we've got our LAN drivers. I'm just going to show them all. So because our PC's got two different Ethernet ports, we've got two different Ethernet drivers for each port that we're going to plug into. So the Realtek driver is for our 5 gigabit port, and the Intel driver is for our 2.5 gigabit port, so that's the one we're plugged into. So I'm going to go ahead and download it. I'm also going to download the Wi-Fi driver in case we have any problem with Ethernet, so we'll click on Download. Then if we head over to our Downloads folder, I'm just going to extract the contents of each of these files. And then I'm going to copy the two folders and paste them onto a USB drive. So we're going to have to repeat the initial setup steps. So now what we can do is click on Install Driver. I've plugged in our USB drive, so I can go ahead and select our Ethernet driver, and we'll click on Select Folder. So what it's going to do, it's going to search for the folder for drivers and go ahead and install them. And there we go, that's us connected to the internet. So it's telling us we have to reboot now, so we'll go ahead and do that. If you don't have an Ethernet connection or you'd rather install the Wi-Fi drivers, just go ahead and select the folder that has your Wi-Fi drivers in it. After the drivers have been installed, you'll see the available Wi-Fi network. You can go ahead and connect to your network and click Next to continue. So if you do have any problem installing your drivers, I'll show you how to set Windows up without an internet connection. Another reason for doing this is if you don't want to use a Microsoft account. So at this stage, what you're going to want to do is click on Shift and F10. And then after the System32, you're going to type exactly what I have got on the screen and press Enter. At this stage, your PC is going to reboot, and then we're going to need to go ahead and do the initial options again. So this time we've got an additional option down here, which is I don't have internet. So we can go ahead and click on it, and then it's going to get you to set up a password and go through some security questions, and you're going to be able to set up Windows without an internet connection or a Microsoft account. If you're doing this because you don't have an internet connection and you do want the Microsoft account, all you can do is once you've got into Windows, install the drivers, and then you can add your Microsoft account. Okay, so we need to name our PC. I'm going to call it Lancool 207 and click on Next. I'm going to set up for personal use. Click Next. The PC is just going to check for updates at this stage, and it might take a little bit of time. Okay, next thing to do is sign in to our Microsoft account. And if you don't have a Microsoft account, you can go ahead and create one here. And then we can create a PIN. In the next lot of screens, you just need to pick the options that you want. So if you have done PC builds in your account before, there may be some backups you can restore from. I want to set this up as a new PC, so I'm going to click on More Options. I click Set Up as a New PC and Set Up as a New PC. I'm just going to skip through these next lot of screens, so we'll skip. Obviously, if you have different options, go ahead and pick whatever you want. Okay, so that's Windows 11 installed. We're getting a pop-up about downloading ASUS Driver Hub. So I'm going to click on Yes, because this will simplify the installation of our drivers. We're going to need to scan down to the bottom and click Accept, and click on Finish. Okay, so the first thing I like to do in any PC is make sure Windows is fully up to date. So we click on the Windows icon, we'll click on the Settings, we'll click on Windows Updates, and we'll click on Download and Install. So we're going to keep coming back here, and we're only going to move forward once there's no further updates available. Okay, so whenever I click on Check for Updates, there's no further updates available, so Windows is fully up to date. Next thing I want to do is install our drivers. So we'll click on ASUS Driver Hub, click Yes. Okay, so what this has done is find a whole load of drivers for our particular PC, and there's also some software packages as well. Now, you can install the drivers through here, or because we're going to be installing Armoury Crate, it's also possible to install them with Armoury Crate as well. I'll show you installing the chipset driver from here, because that's definitely one that we're going to want. So to complete the installation, we are going to have to restart our PC, so we'll click on Restart Now, and then we'll go back into the ASUS driver hub. Okay, so you could of course just repeat this process installing the rest of the drivers, but I normally install them using Armoury Crate. So I'm going to go ahead and install Armoury Crate. We are going to need the Armoury Crate to control the RGB effects on our motherboard, our RAM, and on our graphics card. So I'm just going to install the Armoury Crate and click on Start. Obviously you don't want Armoury Crate running in the background, you can install the rest of your drivers just like I showed you how to install the chipset driver. And we can click on I understand, click Yes. Okay, so we can click on Reopen App. We need to scan down the bottom and click that we agree. I'm just going to skip this for now and click on Cancel. So we're going to go ahead and click on the Tools tab, and the first tab is Drivers. So it's going to scan the drivers that we have. So Armoury Crate has scanned our system to see what drivers we have, and a lot of them have already been installed or are up to date. So the additional ones, the LAN driver, which we do want, so I'm going to leave that on. The Serial I/O driver, we're going to want that. Intel Smart Sound Technology, the management intake, and our audio drivers. And you can see a lot of our other drivers, our Wi-Fi drivers, our LAN drivers, and our chipset have already been installed. So I'm happy with all the things it's installing. It's not installing anything unnecessary, which is why I trust this program in terms of what it puts on. So I'm going to click Download and Install. And this will take a little bit of time. Okay, so that's all our drivers installed. To finish the installation, we're going to need to click on Restart Now. So the only driver that we won't get from the Armoury Crate that we need is the one for our graphics card, and we're going to get that from the NVIDIA app. And you'll find links to everything that I show you in the description. So we'll click on Download Now, and we can go ahead and install the file. Click Yes, and Yes again. We'll agree and continue. So the first thing to select is what type of drivers you want, and that depends what you're using your PC for. If you're using your PC mainly for gaming, you're going to want to get the Game Ready drivers. If you're using it for content creation, pick the studio drivers. So for this PC, I'll set it up for gaming. So we'll click the Game Ready drivers and click Next. So you can select whether you want the app to optimize things. I'll just leave that on and click Next, and done. We can head over to the Drivers tab. You see it's found a Game Ready driver, so we'll click on Download, and we'll click on Install and click Yes. I'm happy just for an express installation, so we'll click on Continue. And it is normal for your screen to flash during this installation, so don't be alarmed when it does this. Okay, so that's everything installed. We can click on Close. Okay, next thing I want to show you is how to get all your drives to show up on the PC, because if we go over to this PC, what you'll notice is only our 2TB drive is showing up and the 1TB drive that we've installed isn't appearing. So to get it to show up, we're going to need to type Disk Management and then Create and Format Hard Disk Partitions is going to come up, so we'll click on it. So it's found our additional drive, disk 0, so we're just going to click on OK. And we can show it's currently showing up as unallocated space, and disk 1 is our 2TB drive, which is Windows installed on it. So we just need to right click on the drive, click New Simple Volume, click Next, Next. If we want to change the letter from D, we can do it here, but we'll click Next. And then we can name the drive and click on Next and Finish. Okay, so you now see the drive is showing up, and if we go back to this PC, you can now see that both our drives are available. Okay, the next thing I want to do is show you how to activate Windows 11. So you can see here our copy is not active. There is an option to get a license from the Microsoft Store, so let's just see what they're charging for it out of interest. So just under £220, so we definitely don't want to get it from here. There's a whole variety of different sites selling Windows keys, so I'm going to take this Windows 11 Professional key here and click to Add to Cart. I'm going to view the cart, and we'll click on Apply Coupon, and we'll click Proceed to Checkout. So there you go, so we've got it for half price, so $15. So we'll click on Proceed to Checkout, and I'm just going to put my details in and pay for this. So after about 5 minutes, we're able to access our code, so we'll click on Copy. So head back over to Settings, we can click on System and Activate Now. We can click Change Product Key, and we can paste the product key into the box and click on Next and Activate and Close. And there we go, Windows is currently active. Okay, next thing I want to do is show you how to update the BIOS. So we're going to click on the support tab on our motherboard's page. We'll click drivers and utility, BIOS and firmware. And we've got the BIOS tab here. We can just expand it to show all. Okay, so we've got the different versions of the BIOS here. In general, I would recommend going for the latest stable version. So you can see the top version is a beta version. So we'll take the version before that and click on download. So we'll head over to our downloads folder. So we're just going to copy the zip file and put that onto our USB drive. Okay, at the end of the BIOS, what we're going to need to do is restart our computer. So we'll click on the power icon and click on restart. What we're going to do once the screen goes blank, we're going to start pressing the delete key. And then as the PC restarts, it should load into the BIOS as long as we press delete. So you can see our current version of the BIOS here, and that's from the 22nd of October last year. So we're going to click on the Tool tab. We'll click on the ASUS Easy Flash 4 utility. We can click on our drive, and here is the zip folder. So this is going to contain our BIOS and the management engine. So we'll click on yes, and yes again. So we can see the version of the BIOS and the date of the BIOS that's going to be updated. We'll click on yes. So what's really important here is that your PC does not lose power during this update. So don't do this if there's a chance that the power is going to go off. And whatever you do, don't touch your PC, go anywhere near the cables where there's a risk of you pulling a cable out during the update process. Okay, so that's the BIOS updated. We can click enter and the PC will reboot. Okay, so that's our BIOS updated. We can go ahead and press F1 to enter the BIOS. Okay, so we can see our BIOS has been updated to the latest stable version. So we can go ahead and click on the easy mode. And I think this is a good place to get an overview of our system to make sure everything is behaving as it should. So we can see our CPU temperature here, and it's always worth having a check of this when you built a new PC. I have built a PC before and found the idle temperatures were up in the 60s, and this very quickly alerted me to a problem with the IO pump. So we can see a lot of other information on the screen. In particular, we've got our RAM, so it's currently running at 5600 mega transfers per second, but we can enable the XMP profile. So all we need to do is click on it and click enabled. And that will increase the frequency of our RAM up to 7200 mega transfers per second. We can see our drives, so we've got our ADATA Legend, our Gen 5 drive, and our Gen 4 2 terabyte drive, and we've also still got our USB drive that we use to update the BIOS. And here we can see our fan speeds. So we've got our AIO pump, we've got the fans on the radiator plugged into the CPU fan, and we've got our two different groups of system fans, our front and bottom fans, and we can see the speed that they're currently running at. If we want to make any adjustments to these, we can click on Q fan control. And again, here we've got a little bit more information and a number of different sources of temperature. So starting off with our CPU fan, we can see the current fan curve it's running in. That is the standard fan curve. The CPU fan control is auto detect. In older motherboards, you did have to select between DC and PWM mode. So for example, if I switch over to DC mode, you'll notice that the fan curve jumps up massively and there's a lot of extra noise happening in the background. And this is what I'd mentioned before. With DC mode, your idle speeds tend to have to be higher. If we go and pick PWM mode, you'll notice that the curve jumps all the way down. So the auto detect mode had actually picked up that we had a PWM device and ran it in the PWM mode. In terms of the source, it's taken its temperature off the CPU, and there is other adjustments that we can make here. If we want, we can change the fan curve slightly. So we want to pick the silent curve, we can do that. If we want to run it at full speed, it's possible, not that we're going to want to do that. And if we want to make up our own manual curve, we can do this, and then we're just going to be able to drag the points on the curve to exactly where we want them. So I'm happy enough for the CPU cooler to leave it in the standard curve. We'll just leave it on PWM mode. Auto detect was fine as well. So we'll head over to our AIO pump. So it's currently running at full speed in auto detect. We can see the temperature is going to be taking that from the CPU and the current speed. And I normally just do run the pump at 100%. So we'll take a look at our chassis fans. Okay, so we've got one group of fans plugged into chassis fan header number 2. You can see by the fan curve, these are probably already running in PWM mode using the auto detect. If we want to switch to DC mode, you'll see again that the default fan curve is going to jump up massively and there's a whole load of noise coming in the background. So I'm just going to select PWM mode, as though as I mentioned, there's probably no need to, we can just leave it in auto detect. Now, the one thing that this is doing is it is taking its temperature source off the CPU. So when our CPU temperature increases, the fan speeds in the case are going to bring more cooler into the case and more cooler into our AIO. So this is great in terms of cooling, but not great when you're using your PC and sitting beside it. As we've said, our CPU is idling round about here, and if we do some simple tasks in Windows, it's going to be on this steep part of the curve. So all our fans in our system are constantly going to be ramping up and ramping down, and it can be quite annoying. There's a few different ways we can handle this. The first thing we can do is head over to the manual curve, and we can flatten this bit of the curve out ourselves. Alternatively, what we can do is change the temperature source that it's reacting to. So we can go into here and, for example, pick motherboard. Motherboard is going to be a much more stable temperature source, and it's going to mean that our fans are probably going to run in round about that 20 to 30% most of the time. Not as good for cooling, but it will be a much more pleasant PC to sit beside and a great way of reducing noise. What I'm planning on doing is some thermal testing, so I'm going to leave everything as it was. So we'll go back to the CPU. The only thing I'm going to do is go for the silent fan curve profile for our case fans. And it's just going to flatten this curve down a little bit. So we'll head over to our other set of case fans. Again, I'm just going to select PWM mode to make sure, although it looks like it's already running in the PWM mode. And I'm going to leave the source as CPU until I've done my thermal testing. We'll click on silent, then click on exit. Okay, so that's the main changes that I want to make in the BIOS, but there is a whole load of options in the BIOS that you can have a read about, and there may be other options that you want to do. For example, you want to do the overclocking, it's the tweaker tab that you're going to go to. In the advanced tab, there's a whole lot of other options as well. But to save the settings that we have changed, all we need to do is click on the exit tab, and we're going to click on save changes and reset. So what it's going to do, it's going to give us a summary of the things that we have changed. So we're getting lots of information about the RAM that we have adjusted, enabling the XMP profile, and then also the changes that we have made to our fan curves. So we'll click OK to accept things, and then the PC will boot into Windows. Okay, so that's us back in Windows. The first thing I want to do is check that our RAM is currently running at the correct speed. So we'll hit Ctrl-Alt-Delete and click on Task Manager. We're going to click on the Performance tab, and we'll just maximize that. And then we can click on our memory. And we can see here we've got 48 gigabytes of RAM installed, and it's running at the correct speed at 7200 megatransfers per second. This is also quite a useful place to disable startup apps that you don't want starting up. So I'm not planning on using the OneDrive, so I'm just going to disable it. Just having a look at what else is running, we can see that the ASUS driver hub update is currently running in the background, and we're not going to be using that now. We're using Armory Crate, so I'm just going to get rid of it. So we can right click here and click on install and on install. So that's better. We've nothing running in the background that we don't want running. If you want to customize the taskbar, we can just right click on the taskbar and go for taskbar settings. We can change the appearance of this. So if we just want a search icon only, and we can get rid of the task view and the widgets, and that's going to make things just a little bit cleaner. The other thing, if you don't like the background, you can just right click on the background and click on personalize, and then you've got the option to change to a different background. So we'll just go for this one. If you want to go with a custom icon, you can just go ahead and download the picture file. I've got a picture saved in my downloads. We can just click set as desktop background. So there we go, I think that's looking better already. If we head over to the system tab and then click on display, the other important thing that's worth checking is that we've got the right resolution set for our monitor. So the first thing you want to check is your display resolution, that you've got the maximum that your monitor can support. My monitor can support much more than 1080p, but I'm recording this using an ATEM Mini Pro, and that the maximum output for the ATEM Mini Pro is 1080p, so that's why it's limited to this. The other thing you're going to want to do is check the refresh rate. So we go down to advanced display settings, and again you're going to want to select the maximum refresh rate. You can see here I'm using Blackmagic's designed ATEM Mini Pro, and the maximum refresh rate for it is 60 Hz. Although if I was using my monitor, it would be much higher. So again, you're going to want to select the highest frequency that you can, and then check your monitor stable with it. The other thing I like to do is adjust the power plan. So we head over to System, we'll go to Power, and I like to change this to performance. Over here you've got the option to change when the PC sleeps as well. So last thing we need to do is get all the RGB in our system and customize our pump display. So as we've mentioned, we're going to do that in the Armoury crate. So we can go ahead and click on the Windows icon and click on Armoury crate. And we'll click skip once and cancel. Okay, so just before we do any customization, it is a good idea to check everything is up to date. So we can click on here in the update and go to the update center. And as you can see, we've got loads of updates for our motherboard, our graphics card, and our cooler. So it is important that we update everything. So the first thing I'm going to do is we'll go ahead and click on update. So I'm just going to click on all the updates and we'll only move forward once everything's up to date. So now that we've updated the amp, we can just click on update all. Okay, so now that we've got everything up to date, we can click on the Aura tab and you'll see it has found all our devices. So it's selected our motherboard, the lighting screen, we've got our graphics card, our memory, and the ARGB strips and everything that's plugged into them. So what's plugged into them is the fans and our AIO, and also the two fans at the front of the case. Obviously we don't have to sync everything up, but I think I am going to for this. So we'll click on the Aura effects, and you'll see at the moment we're currently set to rainbow. So here all we need to do to change the effects, we can click, for example, on color cycle, and you'll notice that everything in the case is cycling through the different colors. So I am a big fan of static white in my build, so I'm going to click on static. At the moment it's currently set to red, so we want to change that. All we need to do is click on the red icon and we just need to type in 255 into each of these boxes. And you'll notice that everything in the build has now turned to white. So you can see there the fans at the front of the case are set to white, as is all the RGB on our motherboard, our graphics card, our RAM, and the fans on the AIO. Okay, next thing to do is to adjust what's displayed on our screen. So to do that, we're going to click on the Device tab, and we're going to select our AIO, and we'll click on Cancel. So there is a variety of different effects here, so I can click on something else, and click on Apply, and that'll change what is showing up on the AIO. So I'll show you another one. If you want, you can upload your own file, which can be a picture, a GIF, or a video. You can have the time displayed. So we'll try that. But the one I think I'm probably going to go for is a hardware monitor. So under the hardware monitor, I'm going to go for triple display. And we just have to select what is displayed. So CPU temperature seems good. Let's see what other temperatures we have. So we can go for GPU temperature, and then we have a choice of either frequencies, fan speed, voltages, or temperature. The other thing we could have is a liquid temperature in our AIO, and we'll click on Apply. If we wanted to have something different, we could have a frequency, and we could pick up, for example, our CPU, GPU, or memory frequency. Let's try the CPU frequency and click on Apply. So again, we have the option to pick a custom background, or we can upload our own. So let's see what else we have. I'll show you a few of these. So I think definitely this one seems to be my favorite. And I'm just going to I think I'll go with the liquid temperature. And click Apply. You've also got a whole lot more options, so we can head over to the fan control. So we can change our embedded microfan, which is the one cooling our VRM. So at the moment, we can see the current CPU temperature, and it's working along this fan curve here. That's the default fan curve. If we want to change that, we can pick one of these profiles. For example, we can go for the silent profile, or if we wanted to run on turbo, we can do that as well. And you can see that's going to bring the baseline up and kick that fan speed up. It's also possible to run it at full speed, not that you would want to because the noise is incredible. So I think for now, I'm just going to leave everything on the default fan curve. The other thing we can do, if we head over to our motherboard, you've got loads of options here. You can adjust your shutdown effects. You can look at your addressable headers and make changes here. We can change the lighting on the screen, so it's currently been synced with Aura Sync, but if we want to change it, we can do that. So we can change that over to flicker. There's neon flare. We've got pulse. Or we can just sync it up with other effects, which is just a static white. So I think that's the one I'm going to leave it with. Okay, so that's everything set up and running just the way I wanted to. One thing I often do with a new PC is do some thermal testing, so I will show you how to do that. So the package I tend to use is AIDA64 Extreme, so we're going to click on download. I'll just go back and click download again. So we'll go ahead and open the file, click yes, and OK. Next, we'll accept the license terms and click next. And we'll go ahead and launch it. So you are able to get a 30-day free trial, so this is going to let you test your new PC, make sure everything's working, and you don't need to purchase a license unless you want to. I do have a product key and I'm going to be using this installation to test further PCs, so I'm going to go ahead and enter my product code. Okay, so we're going to want to pick on the thermal stability test. And what we're going to want to do is click on preferences. So we just need to change what we want to look at. So I'm going to look at the CPU package. CPU is actually the socket temperature, so we'll turn it off. And I'm just going to look at the GPU temperature as well. So we'll just go for GPU 1. And I'm going to disable these other things. So the advantage of doing this is we're able to see just our CPU and GPU temperatures, so it's easier for me to see the important bits I'm looking at. So I'm going to stress everything with this. I'm going to stress our local disks, and I also want to stress our GPUs. Okay, so now that we've done that, we can click on Start. So what you'll see, our CPU load has spiked up to 100%, and our CPU and GPU temperatures are both increasing. You can see this bottom green line is the amount of thermal throttling. So with the older CPUs, particularly the 14900K, even with an AIO, we did get an awful lot of thermal throttling. You'll see these new CPUs, they're probably going to hit the 80s at the most in their peaks, and they generally shouldn't thermal throttle at all. In terms of the GPU temperature, I would expect this to run in the mid 60s. So everything at the moment is behaving as it should. But had I not installed the CPU killer right, this would be a useful test just to make sure everything was running well. So we might see high temperatures, we might see crashing when we're testing our PC, and that might alert us to something wrong with the setup. It is possible to take a look at other things while this is running. So over here, you're going to get a little bit more information. If you want more things to display here, you are going to have to do them in the preferences. So for example, under voltages, you've got a whole lot more information here. So you want to see what voltages go into your 12 volt high power connector to your graphics card, you can do that. Currents, powers, flows. We can look at our different clock speeds, so you can, a lot of options to put into here. And in terms of fan speeds, we can look at our AIO pump, our GPU fans. So it might be worth, before running your test, to have a look at the things that you're interested at and fill them all in here. Okay, so that's just coming up on 10 minutes. I'm going to click stop. And what you'll notice then is that the load on our CPU has come right the way down, and our CPU and GPU temperatures are falling quite quickly. So we can head over to our statistics and we can see what the maximum temperature, our maximum CPU temperature was 83, and our maximum GPU temperature is 67, which are very reasonable. I also recorded the noise while the thermal test was running, and we had noise levels of 53 decibels under load. In terms of noise now, with the PC idle, it's around about 34 decibels. And if we head back into our temperatures, we can see that they've fallen down nicely. So graphics card currently sitting around about 33, CPU temperature 37, and still falling. So I'd be very happy with this PC. The parts are behaving exactly as I would expect them to, and the cooling is pretty good. Really happy with the idle noise levels. As I've mentioned, the only thing for me, I would need to use this PC in Windows to see are the fans kicking up and down during normal use, but I haven't noticed this during the installation. So I'm actually pretty happy with the way this PC is running and sounding. So now we come on to setting up our second PC, and I want to start off by showing you something different. I want to show you how to install the BIOS using the motherboard's BIOS flashback button. So there's a button on the back of the PC that will allow us to do this with the PC powered off. So there is certain situations you're going to maybe need to do this. If you've got an older motherboard and a newer CPU, and out of the box that motherboard didn't support the newer CPU, With the number of BIOS updates, it may support that CPU, but if your motherboard has been sitting in the box the whole time, it won't have had those BIOS updates. Previously, what you had to do was get an old CPU, update the BIOS, and then swap the CPU around, and it would work. More recently, motherboards have had BIOS flashback buttons on the back of them. Gigabyte called this Q-Flash Plus, and this button then allows you to be able to update the BIOS with the PC off. And then once the BIOS has been updated, the new CPU should work in it. So although this is an older B650E motherboard, and we've got a new 9000 series CPU, because actually Gigabyte released this motherboard quite late, looking at the BIOS versions, the first version of the BIOS should support this CPU. So actually I could probably power this PC on and it would work, and I would be able to update the BIOS the same way as I showed you with our first PC. But you may find yourself in a situation with different hardware and need to use this, so I do want to show you how to do it. So two important bits of advice. The first would be only update your BIOS this way if you have no other choice. If your PC works, I would do it the way I've showed you with the first PC. And the second thing is, even if you think you have an incompatible CPU and BIOS, you lose nothing by trying to power the PC on. I've done this a number of times and actually been surprised because it does actually work, and then I've been able to update the BIOS the normal way, which I think is much safer. Okay, so the first thing you're going to need is a USB drive, and we'll plug it into a separate working PC. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do with that USB drive is format it in FAT32. So we can right click on the drive, click on format, and you can see the file extension here is going to be FAT32. So we're just going to click on start and click OK. Now importantly, remember everything in this drive is going to be erased by doing this. Next, we're going to want to head over to our motherboards page. We're going to click on support. We'll click on the download tab and we'll scan down to the BIOS. And then what I'm going to do is download the latest version of the BIOS. We can head over to the downloads folder. I'm going to right click on the folder and click extract all and extract. So this is actually our BIOS file, which we are going to need to rename. So we'll click on it and we're going to change it to gigabyte.bin. So we're then going to copy this file and we're going to paste it onto our USB drive. Okay, so the only thing we're going to plug into the PC is our power cable. We are going to turn the power supply on, but importantly, we are not going to flip the power switch on the PC. So if we take a look at the back of our motherboard, you'll notice one of our USB ports has the word BIOS written on it. So this is the one we're going to need to plug our USB drive into. So we take a look up at the top of the PC, we've got our Q-Flash Plus button. You aren't able to get a finger into it, so I'm going to just use the top of a pen to press this button. So just changing the camera angle so you can see this. You can see the orange light flashing here, showing us that the BIOS update is underway. So whenever this light stops flashing, that's going to indicate that the BIOS has been updated. The rules are exactly the same as updating the BIOS the previous way. Whatever you do, do not touch your PC, do not let it lose power because you risk bricking your motherboard. So just stand back and watch. It should take around about 5 minutes. Once the light has stopped flashing, you can try powering the PC on. But the process is slightly different for different manufacturers. So if you've got an ASUS motherboard, what you're going to want to do is again download the latest version of the BIOS. And the same as what we did with the Aorus BIOS, we're going to extract it. So it's actually this cap file, which is our BIOS file. And previously, whenever I was updating the BIOS, I used to just copy this to the USB. But when you look at this package now, we've also got our management engine firmware update. And that's why when you're updating your BIOS, ASUS are recommending you just don't unzip this and you search for the whole file. So it means it can update the management engine at the same time. But that's not what we're doing here. We're going to be flashing this using the BIOS flashback functionality. So it's just the cap file that we are going to want, and we are going to have to rename it. So ASUS have a BIOS renamer for you. So we had to do this manually on the Gigabyte motherboard. So all we need to do is open this file and you'll notice it'll change the name of this file. And I just press any key. And now we're back in. So it has renamed the file for us. So all we need to do is copy this file to the root directory of our USB drive formatted in FAT32. And the rest of the process is going to be exactly the same as the Gigabyte motherboard. Okay, so around about after 5 minutes, the light has gone off. our PC has stayed on, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it off. So that all looked like it went well, although I'm a little bit more nervous by flipping the power switch here than I was with the PC earlier on. I really don't like updating the BIOS this way. The reason I've done it is just to show you how you do it if you find yourself in no other choice but to do this. So I have got everything plugged into the PC exactly the same as the first PC, so we can turn the power switch on and we'll go ahead and flip the power switch on the PC. So that's a good sign. We've got lights on everything, fans spinning. So again, we're just going to have to watch the monitor and hopefully we get a post. There we go, so our PC has posted and it's telling us that the BIOS has been reset, so we're just going to click on enter. So what I'm going to do now is get this PC set up similar to what we've done before. Hopefully we'll do most of it off the camera. I'm only going to jump in and out for bits that are different from what I've shown you earlier on, and there will be definitely a few of these because we've got an Aorus board. Some of the software we're going to use and the processes for changing things is going to be slightly different. I'm going to make a start by showing you the BIOS here and adjusting the BIOS settings. Okay, so the first thing I'm noticing that our BIOS update has been successful. We've got F5A installed, which is the latest version of this BIOS. It's picked up our processor, the 9700X, and both our sticks of RAM are showing up, although they're currently only running at 4800 megatransfers per second. We can see our CPU temperature looks good at 32 degrees C. And we can see that all our drives are showing up. This is our SATA SSD that we installed, and we've also got our two NVMe drives both showing up. So we're currently in the easy mode. There is an advanced mode that we can click on, but I'm probably going to make most of the changes in the easy mode. So to enable our XMP Expo profile, we're just going to go down to here and click on XMP1. And we can click on Smart Fan to adjust our fan curves. Okay, so the process for setting up our fans here is fairly similar to our first PC. We've got our different headers here. We've got our current CPU temperature and the current fan speed of the header that we've selected. And we've got our fan curve here with the numbers down the bottom. Over here we've got our different options and we've got all our temperature sources at the bottom. So you can see our CPU is currently running at 34 degrees. So currently we're on our CPU fan, which is running at a massive 2100 revs per minute. Looking at why it's doing this, so let's have a look and see. So our CPU is 34 degrees, which is round about here, and that means the fans are running probably round about 57%. This must be actually quite quick fans. How we can check is we can go over to here and click on full speed and see what they go up to. So there's absolutely an insane racket coming from the PC. The fans are running at 3200 revs per minute. So these are really, really fast fans. So we'll go back to the normal profile and the noise has jumped right the way down in the background. So I think this is probably where quite a bit of the noise I'm hearing is coming from. These fans are just running too fast because our CPU is going to idle somewhere around about 40. In Windows, which is going to run the fans at 60%, and it's going to go up to somewhere under heavy load to about 60%, so that's the fans running at 70%. And for fans that run at 3200 revs per minute, this is far too high. So we are going to have to set up a custom fan curve. So we'll head over to here and we'll go for manual. And we've got different ways to adjust the fan curves. What we can do is drag the points to where we want them. We have got our temperature along the bottom and the fan speed in PWM along the side. The other thing we can do is enter the values in the boxes at the bottom. So I was actually quite happy with the noise levels of our previous PC, although the fans in this PC seem like they're even noisier. So I'm just going to set up the same fan curves that we had in our previous PC by typing the numbers in at the bottom. Okay, so that looks a little bit better. When our CPU is idle, it's going to be running around about 30% of the fan speeds. And by the time it's hitting up to its maximum speeds, the fans will be hitting around about 55. And you can see our fan speeds have come down a little bit to 1400 revs per minute at idle, which is still reasonably high. We'll go over and take a look at our pump. So our pump is in the CPU opt. It's currently running on the normal fan curve. And as I've mentioned, I do tend to run the pump at 100%. So I'm just going to go and select full speed. It's running off the CPU temperature. It's using the auto detect mode. I'm just going to make sure it's running in voltage mode because it only has 3 pins on it. And you can see our revs per minute are 3200. If we head over to our case fans, which are plugged into fan header number 4, and I'm just going to set up exactly the same fan curve as what we had on our CPU fan. So we're going to go for manual. I'll leave it taking the temperature off the CPU for now. Okay, so that does look better, and the speed of our case fans has come down a bit as well. So that's me finished now. What I'm going to do is go back to the home page, click Save and Exit. It's going to show all the changes that we have made, so I'm just going to click Yes, and the PC will reboot it. So one difference in the Windows installation is we haven't got stuck at the connection phase where we're having to install drivers. It's gone straight past this and installed updates, and we're ready now to sign in. And I do find this normally in the AMD systems, there's no issues at all with connectivity. It tends to be in the Intel systems where you need the drivers to get connected to the internet, either with Wi-Fi or Ethernet. Okay, so that's Windows installed, and we're getting a pop-up about Gigabyte Control Center. So this is going to let us install our drivers without any difficulty, and it's going to allow us to control the lighting effects on our motherboard, on all our fans, our RAM, and also our graphics card. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Install. So we can click on Next, I agree, and Finish. So for the installation of Gigabyte Control Center, we can accept the license terms, and then we're going to need to go over to the updates. So here we are going to have to be careful because there's a lot of things installed that we're not actually going to want. So I'm going to deselect everything. So we are going to need the motherboard RGB tool, the VGA tool. We'll need our LAN driver, Bluetooth driver, chipset driver, LAN driver. We're not going to need the M5 graphics driver because we're using a dedicated graphics card, but we do want the audio drivers, and we'll click on Install. Despite making changes to the fan curves in the BIOS, they are not being applied in Windows. So you can see our CPU fans, the fans on the radiator are back up at 1900 revs per minute. Our CPU op fan, which is where we plugged our pump in, it's no longer running at full speed, and our chassis fans are back up at 850 revs per minute. So the changes we've made in the BIOS are not being applied when we come into Windows. So I've been racking my brain trying to think why, and then I remembered Gigabyte Control Center, which starts running whenever we load Windows, has a fan control mode. So we click on it, we're on our motherboard, and what you can see, it is applying the silent fan profile to all the fans in the system. And as we've already found in the BIOS, with our AIO fans running so loud, this is not what we want. We want a custom fan curve. And you can see our current fan speeds here based on our CPU temperature of 40 degrees. So we're going to have to set the fan curves up both in the BIOS as well as Gigabyte Control Center. So I'm going to click on Manual, and the process is going to be fairly similar to what we've done. We're going to select the fan, so we're on our CPU fan, which is the fans on the radiator. They're running off the CPU temperature, which is the way we want it. And we're just going to have to drag the points on the fan curves so they match what we've set up in the BIOS. So I can't see anywhere to enter the value, so all I've done is drag the points down so we can see our old curve, which we're currently running off. And if I click Apply, it's now going to move on to the new curve, and if we watch our fan speed, they're actually starting to fall. If the speed is still up a little bit too high for your liking, there is potential to make further adjustments to it. So all we would need to do is drag things down a little bit more and click Apply. So that's dropping the fan speed down even further. And I noticed in the background the noise has gone down significantly. So let's look at our other fan curves. So let's go over and take a look at our CPU opt, is where we have plugged in our pump. It's reacting to our CPU temperature, which I want to keep it on. So with this particular one, I do want to run it 100% all the time. So all I'm going to do is drag up all our points up to 100, and then we click Apply. So there we go, we've now got our pump running at 100%, and then the last one that we're going to have to set up is our case fans. Okay, so it's definitely not as nice as typing the values in, but I have dragged the values down, so our curve has been definitely flattened a little bit. So we'll click on Apply, and you notice now we've got the speed of our case fans falling down. So we take a look over at 64, we can now see that our fans are responding to the rate set by Gigabyte Control Center. And this is one of the reasons I'm not keen on having lots of software running in the background. I wasn't aware that this was overriding our BIOS fan curves, but it's good that I've found this out. So if you are going with this particular motherboard and you are going to install the software package, because you will need it to control the RGB effects on your motherboard, graphics card and your RAM, that you're going to know that you are going to have to set up the fan curves in this package as well as the BIOS. So final important step, we have made changes to our fan curve. We have significantly reduced the speed of our fans down. We need to run a thermal stability test to check that we're still happy with our CPU and GPU temperatures. Okay, so thermal testing complete, and you can see our CPU is idling maybe 1 or 2 degrees hotter, but under load it was exactly the same maximum temperature of 60 degrees. We have, however, significantly reduced our noise levels both at idle and under load. We've gone down by 3 decibels at idle from 39 to 36 decibels and 4 decibels under load from 49 to 45 decibels. Okay, next thing I want to do is show you how to set up the RGB in our system and adjust the custom display on our graphics card. So we're going to need to go to Gigabyte Control Center. You can see here we've got RGB Fusion for our motherboard, our RAM and our graphics card. So we'll go ahead and click on RGB Fusion. Taking a look at our motherboard, you can see the RGB effects are currently set to Wave 2, which is a rainbow effect. We can change the effect, for example, if we wanted to make it a static red. So you'll notice that all the areas of lighting on our motherboard as well as the RGB headers have changed to red. And because we've plugged our IO and our case fans, they've also changed to red as well. If we want to change an individual lighting effect, we can select it. And for example, say we wanted to change that to yellow, we can do that. So you'll notice that one area of our motherboard has changed to yellow, whereas everything else has stayed red. If we want to sync all the RGB, we can click on the sync, and that's going to let us change all the RGB in one go, everything that's plugged into our motherboard. So we can have a variety of different effects. Let's go for a cycle, and you'll see now it's going to cycle through the different colors. There's a rainbow wave if you want multiple colors at once, but the effect I want to go with is just a static white. And I want everything to be static white. And then we've got the brightness we can drag up and down to get it to the correct level for us. So you'll notice the lighting on our RAM and also our graphics card hasn't changed. If we want to change it, we can go into our graphics card and you can see the areas that we have on it. We've got the front, the top and the fans, and we can change these to whatever effect we want, and similarly on our RAM as well. If we want all the RGB to be the same color, the easiest thing is to sync everything up. So if you want to just sync your graphics card and your motherboard, you can do that and have a different color for your RAM. But I actually just want to sync everything, so I'm going to click Sync All. And you'll notice now that all the RGB in the system has changed to white, so that's just the way I want it. Next thing I want to do is set up our graphics card screen, so we'll head over to the LCD panel. So at the moment it is set to off, so I'm just going to turn it on. And you'll see our panel has now come on, but the lighting on it is currently set to rainbow. So I'm going to head back over to RGB Fusion. I'm just going to unsync our graphics card and we'll go in and set it up separately. So I'm just going to select everything on our screen and I'm just going to set it to a static white. And I'm just going to select everything else and we'll also go for a static white as well. Okay, so we can go back to our LCD panel. And on this, you've got a variety of options that you can customize. So at the moment, our display mode is Enthusiast 2. I'll change that over to Enthusiast 1 to show what it looks like. And we've got a range of different ones, so let's try Enthusiast number 3. You've also got the carousel information appearing, so we can also turn that on or off, so let's try it with it off. So I definitely don't think that looks as good. I think it's definitely better to have the information being displayed on it. At the moment, we've got all the different options that we can select to have displayed, so I'm just going to select them all. And you'll see it's actually cycling through quite quickly on them, probably too quickly for my liking, and this is the refresh interval. So we can go down to here and we'll set it back to 4 and click Apply. And you'll notice then it's going to cycle through a little bit more slowly. So let's see what else we've got we can add in here. So we've got the option to put a custom image up, so let's try that. So we're going to need to upload our file. So I have put my logo into here, so let's open that. There we go, we can just about get it to fit and we'll click on OK. So that doesn't look great with the carousel display over it, but what we could do is drag that display down to the bottom corner, for example. So maybe down to about here. You try the carousel off. The other thing we can do is add some custom text. Aorus is the default, but we can put whatever we want up on the screen. So you are enjoying the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. We'll see what else we have. So it is possible to also have the carousel information turned on. And again, we can adjust the position of where this appears. And if we want to add additional things into it, we can do that. And then the last one is carousel. And it looks like you're going to be able to adjust a variety of different effects. So we can go from all the different things if you want them to cycle round. and you can change the refresh interval, so you could have the different screens appearing for different amounts of time. We do also have the option here to customize our fans on our graphics card. So here you are able to set up your own fan profiles if you want. So at the moment we're on the default profile. Our auto fan start stop mode is turned on. So you can see over here, it's really only when our temperature is hitting 50 degrees that the fans are going to start spinning, and this is the curve that they're working on. If you want your fans to spin all the time, what we would need to do is turn the start stop off. So we'll need to go to customized, and let's turn this off. So you'll see this is our fan curve. Our fans are going to spin at a constant low rate, looks to be about 1,000 revs per minute until we're hitting 55, and then it's going to go up. We can also fix our speed of our fans if we want them just to run at a fixed speed, but I'm just going to keep everything at the default and click apply. So I do like having the fans stopping at low fan speeds.